My name is Talia Osei, and for 31 years I kept the Tessalon array alive on the floor of Mare Frigoris, on the far side of the gray plain we still call the Long Winter Field. I was an engineer, not a soldier, though by the end, nobody on that base could tell the difference anymore. I am telling this now because the record will say what happened. I want someone to remember why. We knew them as the Reckoning, the culture that wrote Earth off 18,500 years ago. They never invaded. They didn't have to. They came once, took one long look at a world scorched by its own wars and shaking itself apart, and they filed us as a terminal case, a world too broken to save, not worth the cost of finishing. Then they left, and Earth was alone with what was left of itself. What they didn't understand was that we kept everything. Every scar. My grandmother's grandmother, in the years right after the Reckoning left, made the decision that shaped every generation since. Nothing gets erased. The blight line, where the old reactors burned, was never scrubbed clean. It was fenced, mapped, and taught. The fractured habdomes from the long winter were never torn down and rebuilt shining. They were reinforced, exactly as broken as the day they cracked, and children were brought there every year to touch the seams with their own hands. We did not hide our wounds. We built our discipline directly into them. That was the whole of the plan, actually, if you want to call 18,000 years of quiet labor a plan. We didn't rebuild a shining world to impress anyone who might come looking. We built a scarred one, on purpose, and we hid our strength inside every scar. The defense grid I served on the array wasn't hidden under some gleaming new tower. It was threaded through the dead reactor housings of the blight line, drawing power nobody outside Earth would think to look for in a monument. Our warships were built with their old hull damage from the last century of the long winter, preserved under new plating. Not because we were sentimental, but because a hull that has been struck once and held is a hull we trust more than one that has never been tested. I was on watch when they came back. The culling fleet arrived out past the orbit of the outer rings, 11 vessels moving in the slow, deliberate pattern of ships that expect no resistance. Command called them by their old designation. The Reckoning had a formal name for what they did, the Renewal Compact, and these were Assay-class colors, sent to confirm a terminal case and finish what an earlier generation had judged not worth finishing. I watched their approach on the long-range plot for 6 hours before anyone spoke a word louder than a whisper in that control room. 11 ships. Every hull on their scans came back polished, seamless, without a mark on them. I remember thinking that was strange before I understood why. They hailed us less than a day out. The voice that came through was calm, almost bored, the voice of someone reading from a form they had read 1,000 times before. I am Asayor Thren Kest, of the Renewal Compact. This world was marked terminal, in cycle designation 18500. We have returned to confirm status and complete disposition. There will be no further communication required. Command let them come. That was the hardest order I ever watched carried out. To let 11 warships close on a homeworld and say nothing, do nothing, while our own defense officers stood at stations with their hands folded behind their backs. But that had always been the second half of the plan. We did not want to fight where a fight could be avoided. We wanted them to see what they had actually written off, and to leave understanding it, if leaving was still an option they wanted to take. I spent that night at the array doing the same maintenance rounds I had done 10,000 times before, because the training we all receive says that the best thing a hand can do when it wants to shake is stay busy with familiar work. I checked the conduit runs threaded through the old reactor housing under my station, the same ones my predecessor had checked, and hers before her, back through 11 generations of engineers who had never once been asked to fire them in anger. I remember running my glove along a weld seam that had been patched in 3 different centuries, each patch a slightly different alloy, each one a small, honest record of who had been standing where I stood and what tools they'd had to work with. That seam had outlasted every regime that had ever governed the array. I trusted it more than I trusted anything shining. Thren Kest brought her lead ship low over the blight line first, I think out of habit, expecting to find exactly the kind of dead ground her records promised her. I watched her track curve, hesitate, and curve again, slower. She was reading the fence lines, the maintained markers, the paths worn smooth by 18,000 years of children walking them on remembrance days. A terminal case does not maintain its own grave. A terminal case does not teach its children to walk through the worst of what happened to it and come out the other side able to name every piece. Her hail came back different the second time, slower. There was a question in it now instead of a form. I will tell you honestly, I don't know exactly when the decision was made to let her see the rest, because by then, it wasn't my decision to make. But the order came down the line, and every battery hidden inside every preserved ruin along her flight path went live in sequence, not firing, just lighting. A demonstration, not an attack. Power drawn from reactor housings she had already logged as dead. Targeting arrays built into the seams of habdomes she had already logged as ruins. I watched her ship slow to a stop in low orbit, and I watched the other 10 do the same behind her, and for a long moment, nobody on either side did anything at all. She asked, finally, why we had kept the wreckage instead of building over it. I heard the answer given from the surface, and I have never forgotten it. We told her that her people erase what breaks, and call the erasing strength. We had decided a long time ago that what breaks and is kept, and studied, and built upon, is stronger than anything that has never been allowed to show a mark. 18,000 years is a long time to hold to a decision. We held to it. She did not accept that easily. I don't fault her for it. Whatever the renewal compact is, it is not a young thing, and old convictions do not bend on the strength of one flight over one dead reactor field. She brought her ships in closer, testing, the way anyone tests a claim they don't want to believe. She ran passes low over 3 more preserved sites in as many hours. A collapsed transit spire in the equatorial belt, a shoreline where an entire coastal district had drowned in the first decade after the reckoning left, and had been rebuilt on stilts above the drowned original, rather than in place of it. A field of burned agricultural terraces that still, after all this time, grew nothing but the memorial grass we'd planted there on purpose. Each time her hail came back a little slower, a little less certain of the form she was supposed to be reading from. I think somewhere in those 3 passes, she stopped assaying a ruin and started assaying a people, and that is a very different kind of report to have to write. Our answer to that testing was not fire, it was patience. And then, when patience had run its course, and her lead vessel crossed a line we had marked 18,000 years in advance, it was precision. We took out her engines, not her crew. Every one of the 11, in under 4 minutes, disabled and drifting. Not one hull breached, not one life lost that didn't have to be. That was the discipline too. We had spent that long learning restraint alongside strength, and we were not going to throw the first away in the moment we finally got to use the second. I watched Threnkest's ship go dark and drift, and I watched her order the rest of her fleet to withdraw under tow, and I watched Earth let them go. We could have taken all 11 ships. We could have ended the Renewal Compact's claim on this system in an afternoon. We didn't, because that was never the point of the 18,000 years. The point was never to become the thing that erases what it defeats. Her final transmission before the last ship crossed back out past the rings was short. She said she was revising Earth's designation in the Compact's record, from terminal case to unresolved. I think that was the closest thing to an apology her culture had a word for. I am an old woman now, writing this from the same control room where I stood that day. The blight line is still fenced. The habdomes are still cracked, still standing, still walked by children every Remembrance Day, hands on the same worn seams. We did not rebuild ourselves shining after they left the second time either. We are not going to start now. Whatever comes back to test that decision again will find the same answer waiting, built into the same scars, held by the same patience that has never once needed to raise its voice to be heard.